Anytime I've talked about what I pay in rent on this channel, holy moly, that is so triggering for some people. It creates this influx of comments of people mansplaining to me that I'm paying somebody else's mortgage, and if I moved outside of London, I could save money and buy my own property. And of course, the old, I pay that much for my 4-bedroom house in Blackpool. Well, today I'm going to explain to you why myself and so many other people of my generation, and also some other generations, choose to spend our money on rent in London. The biggest reason of all is I don't make enough money to buy a property. Many people of my generation and people who are even older, and of course the people who are younger than me, just cannot afford to buy properties across the UK because the increase in property values has been significantly more over the last couple of decades than the increase in salaries. And this is especially true in London. I remember reading somewhere a couple of years ago that if the price of bread increased at the same rate that housing in London prices have increased, that bread would be like £35 now. But to prove this to you, let's do the math. Personally for me, I'm a single lady, and when it's not COVID time, I usually make not a terrible living, probably higher than the majority of the country. But according to home listings site Zoopla, the average price for a property in London right now is over £644,000. So if we went off the average, and I wanted to get a place around that cost, I would need a 10% deposit, which is £64,000, which even in the good times is more than I make in a year. And then I would need around £579,000 of a mortgage. And in the UK, you can only get a mortgage for 4 to 5 times what you earn annually. And I'm self-employed, so I'm probably not even gonna get the 4 times. But for ease of the math, to get that amount of mortgage, I would need to be making £145,000 a year. Nope, I don't make that. Do you know how many 3-day London itineraries I'd have to sell for me to make £145,000 a year? Okay, so that's the average for London, but even if we half that number, which could get me maybe like a small flat in zone 3 or 4, I would still need a £32,000 deposit, which is not a small amount of money, and my salary would need to be £72,000 a year. Also, we're not including in all of this, as often is not included in all of these discussions about you should be buying versus renting, all of the upfront and then ongoing fees for owning a property, especially a flat. If you have to pay stamp duty or tax on the sale, if it's a flat, you could be paying a couple £1,000s a year on ground rent and other fees, not to mention you have to upkeep the property, which costs money. If the boiler breaks, you have to replace that immediately. You have to fix the roof. And who knows, you might end up paying an extra £400 a month to hire somebody to watch your building to make sure it doesn't go on fire because the corrupt government and the greedy building company built your building with cladding on it that could go up in flames at any moment in time. I think you get the picture. I can envision all the comments being typed out as I'm saying this all now. But Jess, if you just moved out of London, other parts of England and the UK are so much more affordable. Just leave London. Well, thanks, Graham Stephan, for that very helpful tip, but it's not really reasonable for a lot of people to take this step. Personally, for me, there are 2 reasons why. 1, my job relies on me being in London. This channel is not called Love and whatever part of the world that Jess feels like moving to because she wants to save some cash. It's called Love in London, and I need to be in London to be able to do it. And 2, I am a single American woman that is living in a country where none of her family live. All I have are a small group of very close friends, most of who live in London. So I could move outside of London, but then I would be spending so much time and money every single weekend just to be able to go see those people while I live in some countryside village where I don't know anybody. And I don't want a bigger flat or to own a property enough to warrant me making all that effort. And for those of you who are about to comment that the home counties are within commuting distance, don't know if you've been seeing the news the last few months, but the property values of all of those places had already been increasing significantly. But now that so many people are moving out of London, those areas that are commutable have now become increasingly more expensive. And then if you add in the fact that I would need to pay to get my driver's license and then buy a car, it's really not that much cheaper. Now, even if I did actually have a big old deposit and I was making all the money, so maybe I could potentially buy a property. Again, I am an American that is living in London, and I need the flexibility of being able to just end a lease in case something happens and I decide that I do not want to live here anymore. And really, if you're buying a property, you have to plan that you are going to hold on to that property at least for 5 years. And if you don't, chances are you are going to end up losing money on that property when it comes to all the fees, but also the value of the property might fluctuate within that short time frame. So I really value the flexibility of not owning a house that could take a year and a half to sell if I need cash. Owning a property is a lot of cost and responsibility, and I'm sure those of you who are watching would completely agree with me. At this point in my life, I don't have the money, time, the energy, or really the interest to be keeping up a property. I don't really want to spend my weekends painting and repairing and fixing up and problem solving and all that stuff that comes with owning a home. That's great for people who are happy to do that, but it's just not where I'm at. And when things go back to normal, I'm going to be back to traveling a lot. I won't be in the property very much, and I'm going to be just too busy running and building up my business versus taking care of a house. Honestly, I have been researching and reading a lot about this predicament that my generation and future generations are in, where we just really, it's very difficult to get on the property ladder. And unfortunately, there's a lot of shame put onto people who don't appear to be prioritizing getting onto the property ladder, people like myself. But the thing is, home ownership is so out of reach for so many people that I think we really should be changing the narrative from shaming people for not buying a property to helping them recognize that instead of overextending themselves to finally get on the property ladder, to think about other ways that will be better for them to invest their money, whether that be to add more money to their pension or their retirement fund, to start buying things like stocks and shares, ISAs, or mutual funds, or instead of saving for a mortgage, saving up to finally start a business that you've wanted to start and that actually could reap a much bigger return on investment than a house might. So if you're not in a position to buy a property, don't let that stop you from thinking you are not in a financially solid position, because you don't have to own a property to feel like you're an adult and that you are making good financial decisions. Everybody's situation is different. You just have to figure out what's going to be best for you. And even if you still don't feel like you're in a solid financial position because you're just getting started or COVID completely screwed all that up for you, that's okay. Just keep working at it and keep learning and you'll get there. Okay, I do want to hear your input on this, but please be kind and think about the situation that other people are in, especially after COVID, when people have lost their jobs and are in very precarious financial situations. And this video is part of my Back to London series, where I share with you my journey of moving back to London and getting my own flat and all the things that come with that process. So you can watch one of those videos by clicking the box that's popping up over here.